Hail to the King, a short story by Alex Mayer. Jonathan's heart thumped as he hung up the phone. He scanned through the email again. It was dawn, and the cat was rubbing around his feet, purring for a feed, no doubt. The birds had awoken in full song, and dawn threatened to illuminate the stillness of the outside. But bugger the hour, it didn't matter. He scraped the wooden chair across the tiled floor. He didn't take his eyes off the email. He sat and scanned every word again, blinking in disbelief. "Hun!" he called down the hallway to the darkened bedroom where his wife slept. "Hun, you need to see this." Murmurs of discontent flowed through the open doorway. "Coffee," they said, followed by, "What time is it?" In one swift motion, he pulled the magnetic power cable from the MacBook and rushed down the hallway and entered the darkened room. "What's wrong?" she asked, wiping sleep from her eyes, her face now washed with concern. "You remember that story I wrote ages ago? The one with the monsters in it?" "Really, babe? You woke me up this time of the morning?" "No, wait! You remember it, yeah? You said it was great." She nodded and yawned. "Well, I sent it to Stephen King through his Facebook page and... Make me coffee, hun." She rubbed her neck with one hand and stretched out her other arm. "He got back to me." She looked at him, her sleepiness dashed. Jonathan grinned and turned the laptop to show her the email. "Dear John, I got your manuscript. Nice work, man. I can see you're developing a distinct style. I'm running a workshop for horror writers over here in Maine. It's select, and I only have one spot left. I'd love you to be part of it. Bring the wife too. She sounds lovely. I've taken the liberty of reserving 2 tickets, Qantas, business class. I hope that is satisfactory for you. See you in 2 weeks. I just got off the phone with Qantas. This is legit, hun. The tickets are booked under our names and fully paid for. Mary, we're going to Maine. We're going to meet Stephen King." They hugged each other, giggling and bouncing on the bed. Mary stopped for a moment between girlish, excited giggles and asked, "Do you think he has Vegemite, or you reckon we should bring some?" The flight from Sydney to Maine was long and boring. He passed the time poring over his iDevices, which were filled with every King story he could get. He highlighted passages and made notations, asking questions as to why this and how that. And they watched movies and they played Candy Crush together. Sleep, however, evaded them, and when they landed, they both felt tired and irritable. They bustled their way through the airport gates and fidgeted while awaiting their baggage. Minute after torturous minute, their baggage carousel paraded its zippered and overstuffed bag-shaped fairground ponies around and around. Finally, they saw their battered and faded suitcase. The large JM, taped across it with threadbare gaffer tape, stood out among the new and fancy travel bags the other business class passengers used. They spied a young man wearing a dark suit. He held a sign in his hand with their names printed across it. John, in a fit of over-enthusiasm, bashed Mary on the arm with the back of his hand. "That's us, babe. That's our driver. That's the driver dude." She rubbed her arm and fell in behind him, her little legs working overtime, trying to keep up with his long and eager strides. "John and Mary, I presume. Your limo awaits. Mr. King is looking forward to meeting you." The suit-wearing man picked up the case and turned and headed towards the large stretched limo parked outside the double electric doors. The city blurred past and soon turned into country. The country turned into farmland, and the limo turned down a gravel lane shrouded by trees. "Mr. King's place is just around the corner," the chauffeur said, his voice husky and deep. He grinned as he looked at the pair through the mirror. They crunched down the gravel driveway. The trees opened up to reveal a modest house, not the grandeur either of them had expected. Standing at the front door stood a man, his unmistakable square jaw, his small and impish mouth curled at the ends to form a smile. The sun glinted off his round glasses and hid his eyes, but there was no mistaking that iconic face. They jumped out the car. Mr. Stephen King, the horror master himself, greeted them with a warm smile and a firm handshake. "Jonathan, Mary, pleased to meet you. Welcome." He opened his arms and beckoned them to follow. "I'm sorry," she said, blushing and stammering. "I'm a little starstruck. Gosh, I never thought I'd meet you, Mr. King." "You guys must be hungry. Come in. Igor, we'll get your bags." The pair stopped mid-sentence and glanced at each other in the way that only a husband and wife can. A silent message that said, "Igor, are you kidding me? Really?" Mr. King grinned his impish grin again. "Don't worry, the irony isn't lost on me." He stepped up the stairs and entered the house. John couldn't help but notice the odd gait to his walk. "Must have been from that accident," Mary leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. The entrance hall was decorated with photographs. They stopped to look at one in particular. It was Stephen, Tom Hanks, and John Coffey, like the drink but spelt with a Y, standing behind them, dwarfing the pair. "Oh, I loved that movie," Mary gushed. "Here, guys, your room's on the left. Make yourselves at home and join us in the sitting room when you're ready." The double doors to the living room squeaked as they opened. Mr. King stood in front of a crackling log fire with a glass in his hand. He turned to greet them as Igor entered from the side door with a fresh bottle of red and white. "Would you care for a drink?" Stephen asked. He picked up the bottle and examined the label. "Only if they needed me," John grinned, his weak joke flying straight over the head and through to the keeper. A short and awkward silence followed. Stephen King studied John. He looked at him as though he were a spelling mistake on an already edited manuscript, perplexed. "So, red or white?" "Red, please," John flushed, "and I'll keep my crap jokes to myself, eh?" Mary rolled her eyes. "Well," she gushed, "at least it's not me making a fool out of myself." Once again, the awkward silence pressed down on them. Igor poured and handed them each a glass. He motioned them to sit, and they followed his direction. Both sipped and then drained their drinks, and Igor refilled without needing a prompt. "So, Mr. King, you liked my first draft?" "That's why you're here. I can see that I'm in for some competition if I want to retain my throne." He chuckled and sat in a large padded leather chair. "We can't have that now, can we?" "Oh, I can't see my stuff competing with you." As he spoke, the room elongated sideways. He blinked and rubbed his eyes. John glanced over to his wife for some kind of reassurance. Her head stretched and twisted in on itself. Her pretty blue eyes that he'd fallen in love with all those years ago melted, sucking into her like paint gurgling down a drain. "It's good stuff, this vine, isn't it?" His head hit the floor with a resounding thunk, and he huffed. A slow-motion dust particle transformed in front of his eyes into a microscopic spacecraft. He heard a beep, and a voice that sounded like it came from a vintage radio crackled into life. "This is ground control. Proceed with landing," it said, directing the tiny lunar lander home onto the polished wooden floorboards. Was all that John could manage. And then the blackness took him. A slice of consciousness bled through the inky darkness. "My head, oh God, my head," he croaked, and then flinched as his own voice boomed through his skull. Who planted a megaphone in me? Even his thoughts thundered and clobbered his brain into submission. He opened an eye. Much to his relief, he found that it was dark. Thank God for small mercies. He immediately regretted that thought as his head hammered once again. The internal road worker, complete with fluoro-yellow safety jacket and hard hat, wampa-stomped through his mind, compacting the thought back down to a flat, even surface. The other eye opened. He blinked. His eyes adjusted to the gloom. It smelt damp. A dank mustiness hung in the air, and it reminded him of their bedroom after a winter downpour. A few other savoury scents competed for attention. Sweat, piss, what was that other smell? He couldn't see anything other than vague shapes. You that new boy, ain't you? A voice boomed out, beaten by a thick Scouse accent. Got you too, did he? Behind the voice came a snort. It sounded like a laugh, but without any humour. What the bloody hell am I? John asked. His stomach turned as he tried to sit up. Oh God, I'm gonna go. Don't you fucking puke, man. The place will stink like Herbert's arse crack if you puke. Screw you, Barker, you little wanker. Jonathan looked around. He was in a small iron cell hanging from a stone ceiling. Several other cages swung back and forth. Some contained other men, some women. One contained a rotten corpse. Its limbs dangled through the cage floor, which itself was littered with bones and flesh. Where the hell am I? You, my lad, are in his lordship's dungeon, came the same Scouse accent. Metallic clanging of chains rattled along with some grunting. A face loomed into view from the gloom, peering out from behind its own bars. The man behind the face reached with an outstretched arm. He grabbed hold of the cage John resigned it in, and a second hand shot through the bars. My name's Barker, Clive Barker. Leave him alone. Let him die in peace like the rest of us. I told you to fuck off, Herbert. Clive leaned in close. His face was skin and bone, and his eyes caught what little light there was. John was trapped in his gaze, a wild and crazed stare. Miserable bastard he is. Nevermore, nevermore. Oh, great. Now you've woken bloody Poe up. Shut up, Poe, you crazy bastard. John leant forward to get a better look at the man in the cage next to him. You're telling me that you're the Clive Barker? The madman, clinging onto the bars, started giggling and nodding. And I'm not a miserable bastard. I'm just tired and want to die in peace, said the other voice from the darkness. Nevermore. The voice of Poe drifted back into silence. That's James, Clive said in between giggles. James fucking Herbert. Oi, Jimmy, he yelled. Them rats, they'll save you. Because I know you like them so much, eh? There was a loud clang, and light flooded from the doorway above the long and curved stairwell. A silhouetted figure stepped through. He took slow and deliberate steps, showing traces of a slight limp. He held a lantern before him, which swayed back and forth. John watched the light dance, and his stomach churned once more. He noticed that written on the walls and across the steps were words. He peered through the dancing light. The words said things like, softly, harshly, suddenly. Each step echoed off the stone, revealing more adverbs, and the sound reverberated around John's throbbing head. Shut up, Barker, you annoying little scroll. Mr. King's voice boomed out. Yes, me lord. Barker let go of the bars and his cage swung back into place. The chains clanking. King walked around each cage, inspecting the residents within. He stepped up to one with a rotten corpse and picked up its decaying hand. Never did like you, Koontz, he huffed. Extra dinner for you guys tonight. And you'll all have to pick up the slack now that dear old Dean has abandoned you. With that, he turned and strode back up the stairs towards the light. Oi, called John. What the bloody hell are you trying to pull here, man? Herbert gasped, and Barker giggled. It started out as a little titter, followed by a full-blown laugh. Oh, shit, mate. You shouldn't have said that. You'll be in for a flogging now if you keep it up here. Mr. Barker. King seemed to grow as he spoke. His voice rose to a bellow. Well, you keep your goddamn mouth shut and keep writing. Otherwise, it'll be you that gets the flogging. Barker cowered back into his cage to the far side. Where's Mary? John pleaded. I don't care what you do to me, but don't hurt my Mary. King's face loomed from behind the bars and looked at the sick and broken man inside the cage. His white skin flushed red as he grinned. John wasn't sure, but he could have sworn he saw horns poking through the forehead of his captor. She's a pretty little thing, isn't she? King's voice was just above a whisper. John struggled to hear what he was saying. Just write your stories, Johnny boy, King grinned. Evil seeped between his white teeth. Death reflected in his little round glasses. The Horrormeister continued. Write like you've never written before, Johnny boy. Write for your life and I'll keep you alive. For as long as you live, you shall write. Nevermore, came the voice of Poe from the darkness. King turned and headed back towards his adverb-encased stairs. His shadow grew and stretched and flexed wings. The man limped away. His shadow bounded 2 at a time up the steps. King stopped at the top, hovering in the doorway. I've taken good care of Mary, Johnny boy, don't you worry. He paused and then shouted, Long live the king! Long live the king! Came a chorus of bedraggled voices from around the darkened room. John tried to pinpoint how many, at least 10 that he could make out. Then the tapping started. Slight at first, a thunk from an old-fashioned style typewriter, the stroke of a computer key being pressed. The darkened room, which smelt of sweat and piss and puke, and was filled with the sounds of tapping of keys and swishing of typewriter mechanisms. Welcome to the engine room of the Horrormeister, John, Barker said. Better get a light in, mate, or we won't feed you no dinner tonight. I'm waiting for you all to address me, came the voice of Mr. King, booming back through the stairwell. John felt, rather than saw, his gaze of his cellmate towards him. Hail to the king, whispered Barker. John rubbed his eyes, still unable to process what was happening. Hey, Johnny, you'll get us all beaten. Now, you stupid bastard, hail the man for Christ's sake. The whispered tones spat poisonous intent through the darkness. Hail to the king, John said. He dropped his head back into his hands. Better, Johnny boy, much better. Now I want to see your first manuscript by the morning. The Horrormeister turned. The door slammed shut with a boom, and John sobbed. He reached forward to find a cold, hard, metallic object. Was this a dash of hope? Could it be? His MacBook Pro! The light was too bright for him to see as he opened it. He squinted and reduced the brightness so that he could look at the screen without hurting his still delicate eyes. He immediately went to the internet to call for help. But all the icons were gone. They had been replaced by the same symbol, a big blue W with the text Microsoft Word displayed above it. Barker tittled and giggled as he tapped on his own keyboard. Hey, Johnny boy, he said between giggles. Better start a lighting.